Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to be getting started in just a moment. Just going to let everyone log in here. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're going to be getting started with the presentation in just a moment. Before we get started, I'd love to tell you about some other upcoming courses and webinars that we have. Next Wednesday, September 16th, we've partnered with North Carolina Occupational Safety and Health Education and Research Center to offer a free webinar on seat bolster design and discomfort in agricultural equipment. This is part of our Education and Research Center Ergonomics webinar series. Also next month on Wednesday, October 7th, Dr. Howard Malbach from the University of California, San Francisco will be presenting on dermatoxicology, addressing common occupational skin conditions. Our next industrial hygiene themed webinar will be on Tuesday, October 13th with Dr. Thomas Bernard on heat stress management in 2020 in partnership with the Sunshine Education and Research Center. For more about these events, you can visit us at coeh.berkeley.edu/aboutCE. And on behalf of education and research centers throughout the country, we're pleased to present the Industrial Hygiene webinar series, offering free webinars the second Tuesday of each month. This collaborative effort on behalf of each ERC's continuing education program aspires to provide access to current research supported through NIOSH ERC programs. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today's webinar, IH Pilot Studies, Current Research in Food Truck Exposure and Customized PPE, is brought to you by the Deep South Center for Occupational Health and Safety and Dr. Jonghwa Oh. A few housekeeping items first. You'll be muted during this presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please enter it into the online Q&A. We will save time at the end of the presentation to address questions. All participants who log in today with their registration email for the full live presentation will receive a link to the recording and an evaluation form tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific. This evaluation will qualify participants for a certificate of completion with 1 continuing education contact hour. Once the evaluation is completed, you'll be able to access and print your certificate. This presentation is also being recorded and will be made available on the COEH Northern California's YouTube page and on our website. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter. Jonghwa Oh, PhD, MPH, is an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Health Sciences at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and the director of the Industrial Hygiene Program at the Deep South Center for Occupational Health and Safety. Dr. Oh's main research areas are focused on the improvement of the current occupational exposure assessment and control methods. Her research topics include evaluation of air contaminants and ventilation hood performance in food truck environments, development of a fit matching tool to identify better fitting safety eyewear, exposure assessment of hand-arm vibration among grounds maintenance and forestry workers, and development of a novel pre-analysis technique for gases and vapors. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, for introducing me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Okay, here's the outline of my presentation today. First, let me briefly introduce my educational background and the research areas I've been involved in. And then let me talk about a couple of pilot studies conducted by our IH research group here at UAB. So I have an educational background in environmental engineering and environmental health sciences. My study focus has been on industrial hygiene since 2012, since I came to the US. My research area is in occupational exposure assessment and controls. And I've been involved in occupational and environmental noise studies. And also our IH research group here has been working on the development of a novel pre-analysis technique for VOCs. And also, we've been performing hands-on vibration studies related to ground maintenance workers' exposure. And the last two topics here are what I would like to share with you today. So let me start with the first study on the evaluation of a food truck environment. The cooking fumes are generally referred to as visible emissions generated by cooking process. But we know that all of these emissions are not technically considered fumes. So hereinafter, we call them cooking emissions. So the cooking emissions, especially from frying, typically contain fine particles, which are PM 2.5, and also ultrafine particles. And also organic compounds such as PAHs can be deposited on the surface of the particles. And also the certain vaporized or gaseous PAHs and also aldehydes are emitted through from cooking process. And commercial cooking is an important source of ambient particle emissions, which contain a significant amount of PM 2.5. In the US, PM 2.5 emission of approximately 80,000 tons per year was estimated from commercial cooking activities with under-fired charbroiling processes. The emission rate and characteristics of cooking aerosols vary depending on many factors such as ingredients, temperature, stove type, oil type, cooking method, etc. PM 2.5 are of great concern as they are small enough to penetrate deep into the lungs and can cause irritation and damage of the alveolar wall. And aldehydes are generated when fatty acids are degraded. Vegetable oils containing high polyunsaturated fatty acids are more susceptible to oxidation than oils containing high saturated fatty acids, indicating more aldehydes emission. A variety of aldehydes have been found in heated vegetable oils and also beef and pork fats. And most aldehydes are reactive species, and many have been reported having cytotoxic, mutagenic, and carcinogenic effects. And PAHs are produced by pyrolysis or incomplete combustion of organic materials, and also food processing, such as smoking and grilling over open fires or charcoal. Food products such as vegetables, fruits, and oils could be also contaminated with PAHs through environment. Many different types of PAHs have been found in meat products, and oils, fats, and have shown cytotoxic and carcinogenic effects. And most studies have been focused on the contaminant emissions from food or individual ingredients rather than the entire cooking process and the environment. And the food truck industry in the US has rapidly expanded over the past 5 years. This specific occupational environment is occupied with various types of thermal cooking appliances in a very limited space, often without periodic ventilation tests. So the primary aim of this pilot study was to investigate the levels of contaminants generated through the cooking process within food trucks, including PM 2.5, 9 aldehydes, and 18 PAHs, which are commonly found in cooking emissions. In addition, the ventilation performance of food truck exhaust foods was evaluated. To the best of our knowledge, this was the first study to report on the status of food truck environments. The food truck operators who conducted business at popular breweries in Birmingham metropolitan area were directly solicited for participation. Two food trucks in which cooking mainly involved frying of meat with expected emissions of PM 2.5, aldehydes, and PAHs agreed to participate in this study. And here shows their menus. You can see like many of them are fried food with some other options. The first food truck was a trailer type, and they had two different cooking appliances. And the second food truck was a mobile kitchen van with a kitchen and driver cab. And they had 5 different cooking appliances, as shown here. Both food trucks were equipped with the backshelf food, which are typically used in mobile kitchens. The area sampling was performed for PM 2.5, aldehydes, and PAHs. All sampling devices were placed approximately at the height of breathing zone of the workers to simulate personal exposure. I will talk more about sampling method for each type of contaminant in the next. The sampling was performed twice at each food truck, usually on either Friday or Saturday when a higher volume of cooking was expected. And at the end of each shift, a list of all the orders prepared over the course of the work shift was compiled. So for PM 2.5, dust check was used with a PM 2.5 impactor inlet, and sampling durations were from 3 hours to 5 hours. The sampling duration on the second days for each truck represented the whole work shift, while the sampling on the first days stopped earlier than the work shifts. And for aldehydes, passive samplers from ACS were used. And here shows the 9 aldehydes analyzed for. And after each work shift, the field and the field blank samples were sent for analysis to the ACS lab. And those samples were analyzed based on the NIOSH, EPA, and OSHA methods. Let's see. So you can see the sampling durations for both days for both food trucks there. These are basically for their entire work shifts. And the limit of quantification provided by the laboratory varied by analyte and the day of analysis. And you will see them in the result section. In PAHs, samplers were purchased from SCGS Garrison Lab, which consisted of a filter cassette to capture particulate phase PAHs and a sorbent tube to capture vapor phase PAHs. The sampling flow rate was 2 liters per minute, and 18 PAHs analyzed are shown here in the middle. And after each work shift, the field and field blank samples were sent for analysis. And then sampling durations were basically same as for aldehyde samples. The LOQ reported by the laboratory was 0.3 micrograms for all PAHs. And for the evaluation of ventilation performance, Discrete velocity point measurements were taken at the vapor filter surface of the ventilation hood based on the ASHRAE guideline. The dimensions of the entire filter bank of each hood were measured and the filter bank area was split into equal areas. The filter bank dimensions of the first food truck allowed division into 30 squares of 6 by 6 inches, and the second food truck filter blank was divided into 30 rectangles of 6 by 6.5 inches. And velocity was measured in the mirror of each grid using a thermal anemometer. Each velocity measurement was performed for 10 seconds, and then the measurements at each grid center were made in triplicate and averaged. A approximately 2-inch piece of tape was attached to the end of the thermal anemometer probe to ensure that all measurements were taken with a 2-inch standoff distance as recommended by the ASHRAE to basically avoid strong turbulence. And results. The number of food orders during the sampling periods are shown here in the table. Can see the food truck 2 had more orders than food truck 1. And for both food trucks, you see the second day they sold out more food, a little bit more. And the maximum and average PM2.5 concentrations are shown here in the graph. The food truck 2 generated considerably higher PM2.5 concentration than the food truck 1 during both sampling sessions. The greater volume of food orders of food truck 2 was believed to be a major reason, considering the similar portion size in both food trucks. And let me this here. And the cooking equipment can be classified into light, medium, heavy, extra heavy duties by thermal plume strength, which greatly depends on the surface temperature of the cooking appliance. So a gas under fired broiler, the food truck 2 had is heavy-duty equipment. So it's expected for such heavy-duty kitchen appliance to create a stronger thermal plume because of the high temperature. So the use of a gas under fired broiler in food truck 2 would also have been contributed to higher concentration of PM2.5. And we also calculated the TWA concentration of food truck, all of these, and then we found out that the estimated TWA of food truck 2 on second day was the highest, which was 4 milligrams per cubic meter. Although the direct comparison of the PM2.5 estimate to occupational exposure limits is not appropriate due to the different median cut point diameters, the estimated PM2.5 exceeded the ACGIH TLV for respirable particulates not otherwise specified, which is 3 milligrams per cubic meter based on median cut point diameter of 4 micrometers. And this table shows aldehyde results. You can see all aldehydes in all blank samples were below the respective LQs. And when calculating these averages here, the results below LQs were substituted with half of the LQ, sorry. So, and you can see the formaldehyde was the only compound detected in all samples taken in both food trucks. And acetaldehyde and propionaldehyde and hexaldehyde were found in 3 out of 4 samples. So overall, The cooking activities of food truck 2 generated higher aldehydes concentrations. The higher volume of food orders of food truck 2 appear to be the primary reason, like PM2.5. Also, the use of heavy-duty equipment could have contributed to the higher levels of aldehydes, as both food trucks used vegetable unsaturated oils, and studies showed that aldehyde emissions from unsaturated oils increased at an increased temperature. And then hexaldehyde level was considerably higher than the other aldehydes. It is known that linoleic acid, which is a polyunsaturated fatty acid, is the main precursor of hexaldehyde when oxidized. But we couldn't find a conclusive reason based on the cooking oils they used. And there are no OERs for or the relevant regulatory limits for hexaldehyde, but health effects reported include ocular irritation and pulmonary toxicity. Then lastly, the estimated TW for formaldehyde exceeded the NIOSH REL, which is the lowest OEL. But the limitation of the study is that it should be noted that the comparison of these results for aldehydes as well as PM2.5 with relevant OERs would more likely overestimate the true exposure of the workers, as we did area sampling and we placed them in the proximity of the emission source rather than the area they are moving around. And the sample taken on day 1 at food truck 2 was determined to be invalid due to an incorrect sampling procedure. And PAHs in all blank samples were below the LOQ, and no single PAHs was found to be above LOQ in the rest of the samples. And these figures show the average velocities at each measurement location. So the validation performance of the back shelf foods in the two food trucks was similar. An average exhaust flow rate was 211 and 215 liters per second per linear meter of each food for food truck 1 and food truck 2 respectively. Those are actually below the recommended exhaust flow rates by the ASHRAE. For food truck 1, which had a medium duty equipment, 310 to 465 liters per second per linear meter of food is required. And for food truck 2, which had heavy duty equipment, 465 to 620 is required. You can see on the top how the back shelf of food looks like. So you can see there the front of the back shelf foods was behind the front of the cooking appliances all the time because of the configuration. This is very typical for food truck foods to allow head clearance, but it generally lowers the food capturing efficiency. And the food truck 2 had even a shorter food front compared to the food truck 1. The low exhaust rate and the configuration of the food in food truck 2 could have also contributed to the higher concentrations of aldehydes and PM2.5. So to sum up this study, the food truck 2 had higher levels of aldehydes and PM2.5 with the comparable ventilation performance with the food truck 1. The higher exposure levels were possibly attributed to a larger volume of food odors and the use of heavy-duty equipment with inadequate ventilation. So it appears that the food truck environments may pose a health risk because of high emissions and low exhaust flow rates. Our next step will be using a larger sample size and certifying cuisine type and cooking method to better understand the effect of ventilation on the levels of aldehydes and fine particles in food truck environments. We are planning to perform this study this fall, but because of the COVID, we couldn't put an IRB approval because of the concerns with contact. Then second pilot study I'd like to share is regarding the development of a fit matching tool for safety eyewear. Some introduction. Eye injuries in the US account for more than 140,000 disabling work injuries every year, which direct and indirect cost is estimated at over $4 billion. Two major reasons that workers sustain eye injuries on the job are, first, they are not wearing eye protectors, and second, they are wearing the wrong kind of protectors for the job. And also, as PPE is a last resort, failure in the field would cause traumatic injury and illness in the workplace. And many safety eyewear, protectors come in universal size or small, medium, large if available. So there's a need to improve the protective eyewear fit for the diverse US workforce to prevent eye injuries. So our research group has been investigating the development of a fit matching tool supported by a smart device application using 3D technology. The purpose of this pilot study was to examine the feasibility of the use of the current 3D technology, 3D scanning apps, and 3D scanner to identify better fitting safety eyewear. And for that, 3 steps were followed. The first, 3 different 3D scanning apps on a smartphone were tested to determine the best app which could produce the most efficient images. We used a couple of the NIOSH physical headphones in short, wide, and long narrow sizes. You can see up there on the right too. Then second, a database of safety eyewear was established by scanning safety spectacles using a light scanner. And lastly, best pairs of safety spectacles for each headphone size were selected by comparing anthropometric and gap measurement data. And for the first step, the 3D scanning, 3D scanning apps were tested, including Culon 3D, Scan 3D, and Trino 3D. The Culon 3D was only app which can be used on both Android and iOS operating systems, while Scan 3D was available only on Android. And the last one, Trino, was available only on iOS. So the first 2 scanning apps, Culon and Scan 3D, were tested on Android phone, and the last app was tested on an iPhone. And to create 3D images of the NIOSH headphones, we basically followed the instructions from each app while making some adjustments to get better images. And to determine the best 3D scanning app among those, three sets of criteria were assessed, including the ease of use, reliability, and cost. For ease of use, the number of photos to create a full image, time to process and download, and applicability in CAD programs were evaluated. For reliability, the number of error messages was recorded. And for cost, price to download an app and export files in an STL format was considered. And along with the established criteria, we assessed the clarity of the final 3D images. And for the second step, a light scanner was used to scan 8 different pairs of safety spectacles. All of them were full frame, as listed below. And once the first scan was completed for each pair, the 3D images were uploaded into a CAD program. We used Fusion 360 in an STL format. And in the step 3, 2 sets of measurements were performed to determine how well each pair of safety eyewear fit on both the headphones. And they were anthropometric measurements and the gap measurements. The anthropometric measurements were collected by measuring the maximum frontal breadth of the headphones, which is defined as a distance between the left and right zygofrontal landmarks, as shown here. And the temporal width of the eyewear we used the measurement tool in the software. And for gap measurements, 3M Eyewear Fit system was referenced, in which 12 gap locations are measured to determine the gap size between the face and the eyewear, as shown on the left. So to measure the 12 gap locations, 4 metric Allen wrenches with 4, 6, 8, and 10 millimeter ends were used, as shown on the right. And starting with the 10 millimeter wrench, if the wrench end was able to pass between the eyewear and the, shown here, and the eyewear and the headphone face at each location, the gap checking was continued using gradually smaller wrench sizes until the test wrench fits tightly between the eyewear and the headphone face. And results, the figures here show 3D images downloaded from each app into the CAD program. And left one shows the image from Chrome, and middle one is from Scan 3D, and the right one is from Trino. And then you can see, you can notice that the first two apps distorted the image on the top of the head. And this table summarizes the comparison of the 3 apps based on the set criteria. In addition to that, we observed that the scanned 3D and Chrome apps showed some degree of distortion, as just I showed you. And also the final images were not appropriately scaled to the real size. So because of the main issues, the Trino app was determined to be the best overall choice after assessing all of those criteria, which we added like a couple of criteria like clarity and scalability after all. And this table shows the final scanned images of the 8 pairs of spectacles from the CAD program. The frame width of each pair was here on the right, extracted from the software to be used in the step 3. In the comparison of the frame width of the eyewear with the maximum frontal breadth of the short wide headphone is shown in this table. And a difference of 4 millimeters or less was used to choose a better fitting safety eyewear. And you can see 7 pairs in red were within 4 millimeters, including Bullhead Maki, Carhartt, Carbondale, Ergodyne, Bezier, Jackson, Holaser, Pyramex, Goliath, Smith and Wesson Elite, and SSP Nash's Blue. And for the long, narrow headphone, a difference of 6 millimeters or less was used instead of 4 millimeters, just to have more options to choose from. Otherwise, we had only one option, which was ergodyne baser. So 3 pairs of spectacles, including Bullhead Maki, ergodyne baser, and Jackson Holaser, were selected. And for gap size, 3D recommends less than 6 or 8 millimeters. So for the short wide headphone, a gap less than 6 millimeters was used to determine better fitting safety eyewear. And these 5 pairs shown here, Burhead Javelin, Carbondale, Ergodyne Curvacer, Jackson Holaser, and Smith Wesson Elite had gaps less than 6 millimeters at all 12 locations. And let me see. Okay. For the large narrow headphone, only one spectacle had the Javelin, first one here, had gaps less than 6 millimeters. So we had to increase the tolerance to 8 millimeters to basically have more options to choose from. So a gap less than 8 millimeters was used to determine the better fitting safety eyewear. And 5 pairs of those shown here, Bullhead Javelin, Maki, and Carbondale, Goliath, and Elite. And then based on the anthropometric and gap measurements, 4 spectacles with the closest overall match for the short wide headphone were Carhartt, Carbondale, Ergodyne, Curvacer, Jackson, Holaser, and the Smith and Wesson Elite. And for the long, narrow headphone, only one spectacle Bullhead Maki was the closest overall match. And to conclude this study, the use of 3D scanning app and 3D scanner to identify better fitting safety eyewear was feasible to proceed our future studies. Tornado 3D app on an iPhone produces the most efficient 3D images, and a database of safety spectacles was successfully established. And the short wide headphone had more options of spectacles with the closest overall match, while the long narrow headphone had only one option of spectacles, even with the greater tolerances we applied. And currently, we are examining other 3D scanning apps on a smartphone and including more selections of spectacles in our database. And we are also looking for other anthropometric data for objective comparison between the face and spectacle dimensions. And we are developing a smartphone app which can import the 3D scan data of the user's face and find the user better fitting safety eyewear in our database. And I would like to thank our students. It would not be possible with our students, Holden and Shanira, who worked on these projects. Both are now graduates. And my collaborator, IH faculty here, Dr. Claudio Longo. And thank you all for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation, Dr. O. At this time, we are taking questions. So you're welcome to enter any questions that you have into the online Q&A box. And I am happy to read them aloud to our presenter. The first question that we have in is, have the food truck operators tried any interventions for improving airflow?
Can I see the question?
Oh, sure. So have food truck operators tried any interventions for improving airflow?
No, we actually, unfortunately, one of the food trucks, actually they stopped the business. So we had to just talk with one of those food trucks and then we showed the data, but no, they didn't do anything, but actually it was our next step to, with the more sample sizes, once we see something, low flow rate, then that was kind of next step to intervene with their flow rate. Like we, hopefully next year we can do this field study again. We are planning to put some side panels if something we observe like a low flow rate, and also even we can just push the appliance back to have like a less, the front part of the appliances. So yeah, we are thinking about having more interventions after we have more samples.
Excellent, thank you. And out of curiosity, in the next study that you're designing, I guess once we're able to go back back out into the field, do you have a particular target for the number of food truck samples that you're hoping to get?
At least more than 10 food trucks, and even during summer, because we started sampling like probably later fall, so we didn't have many, many food orders as much, as much as we expected. So I'd like to include more sample size, like maybe 10 to 20 food trucks. And this time we will do personal sampling instead of area sampling, and maybe we can make some compensation for that. And yeah, that's we are now thinking. Hopefully next year it can happen.
Great, thank you so much. We also have a question regarding if you're able to share any resources in relation to your presentation, or where people might be able to find more information on these topics.
So the food truck study, this one actually is published. If you see in the reference, the first one is you can see everything there. And if you can ask him, you can email me. I can send it to you too. And
Great, thank you.
yeah, and then the next study is still ongoing study. So we are adding more data now. So if you want to see more, you can just email me. I can share.
Great, thank you. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter it into the online Q&A question box. We have a couple more questions here. Were the samples collected as breathing zone or area samples?
Yeah, it was area samples, but the height of samples was similar to the breathing zone. At the height of breathing zone, but it was area sampling for sure.
Great, thank you. And do you have any ideas that you were planning to share with food truck operators?
Uh, I mean, we after we get all results, we always plan to go back and then share our results. That's what we did last time, but we kind of missed one food truck. They don't do the business anymore. So, and the thing is, they are not really they are not really interested that much. Like when I shared this information, like, oh, that's okay, and then that's good, and yeah, that was all. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And when was the study conducted? And we have a question regarding how the pandemic may have affected airflow measurements. For example, if windows are normally open or closed, and if they were covered because of pandemic conditions, or whether this study was done prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, it was prior to pandemic. It was what's that? Actually, it's been a year. It was
Okay.
yeah, and then that definitely there was a kind of thing we need to figure out better because it was late for they still kept the windows open around because it's hot inside. So I think in the way where some the contaminants are just going out, and then we couldn't really have a control over that. I thought that was more like a natural exposure that they have.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Do you foresee any guidelines or regulations to look at air quality in food trucks?
Not really. I actually tried to find something, but not really. They are not really regulations you can find is when it comes to food truck. But I think it also depends on the city and state. I've found some more specifications, for example, in Georgia, but I haven't found in here in Birmingham or other areas. But definitely I saw something from Georgia. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm also question regarding if there's any plans to expand this idea into food preparation and air monitoring evaluations in restaurants or other food establishments.
Uh, yeah, actually, if we have more resources, we want to actually compare the emissions from food trucks and the restaurants. And it would be great to have, both the ventilation, uh, evaluation as well as the air quality evaluation. Yes, definitely that's on our way.
Thank you. Um, and I'm curious too, in terms of the types of ventilation, in your experience, do you see a similar types of ventilation in all food trucks? Is there a lot of similarities and differences between food trucks and restaurants? And any information you're able to share around the types of ventilation you've seen?
Yeah, the for those mobile trucks, mobile cars, that's almost universal. You have the backshelf food. But yeah, configuration is a little bit different. Some are the larger or short, the smaller, and the maybe angle is a little bit different. Yeah, and but basically they are the bachelor foods. And some interventions I shared before is like we can we can put side panels or a little bit in the front as long as we don't interfere with the head clearance, and then we can push the equipment back so that the ventilation efficiency is increases because sometimes the equipment has some space behind the kitchen appliances, which lowers the ventilation efficiency. So this kind of thing we are thinking about once we have more data.
Great, thank you. I'm also particularly interested in thinking about like barbecue smoking type establishments, and I'm curious if you've encountered any research on the exposures as it relates to smoking barbecue.
Well, actually, last semester, not spring, no, last fall semester, our students actually went out because we had the samplers left. So we asked them, why don't you guys have fun? And then we gave them all samplers, PAHs and aldehydes, and they grilled outside. And then, yeah, they sampled, but again, they didn't find any PAHs, but they found some like aldehydes, like a formaldehyde, like we found. So yeah, that's what they did with the left samplers, and kind of interesting that we couldn't find any PAHs. Yeah, probably we can explore more like a charcoal or the woods later.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Thank you. We also have another question. I noticed a difference in the condition of the intake grills. Did you evaluate any maintenance conditions that may have affected ventilation performance?
No, I asked them, do you do any maintenance or, then, no, they didn't do anything. That has been there forever since they got the food truck. Yeah, and I think actually it's a good idea for us to service, for them to measure, check the ventilation rate like periodically, so that they know better about. And some are not really working well, and they don't really clean the filter either. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Another good question as you do move forward with other more studies. So another question, how do we get food truck operators to take notice considering the micro business nature?
uh, I think there's like a I just found that there's like a food truck guide sharing information like where they are and then things like that. Like it's sort of a food truck operators association. I don't know if it's everywhere, but I found it in Birmingham actually. So yeah, I think that would be a good route to communicate with them. And yeah, and then also there should be some like a former food truck operators association than those two. So I think we can definitely look up that route too. And actually the interesting thing is the guys each know each other somehow. So when we got the first food truck guys, they we are asking like, is there any guys who might be interested in participating in the study? And then they're like, oh, I can call someone else here. So that's actually how we got the kind of a second subject. But maybe yeah, they actually they contacted for us to ask the other guys if they are interested in.
Oh, awesome. So using some built-in community
Right,
there.
right. That's yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And again, we do have a few more minutes for questions. So if you have a question that you would like to ask, you're more than welcome to enter it into that Q&A bar there. I'd also love to transition a little bit to talk about your research with the PPE. And you mentioned you're developing a smartphone application, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about that smartphone application and how it might be used.
Yes, what we are planning to do is basically we are gonna be using the current 3D scanning app, which creates efficient images. So because I mean everyone can just scan by their face easily with the 3D scanning app available on their phone. And then our app is gonna be importing the data into our app. And then our app will have a full database of the safety eyewear. And then you can compare the dimension of the person's facial dimension with the safety eyewear dimension we have in our database. So based on that, our app should be able to list better fitting safety eyewear from 1 to 5, whenever they want. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Do you have an estimated time that you're planning on launching the app?
Well, it's we have a software engineer. It depends on him, but he
No
needs the
pressure.
money for that, honestly, because we have to pay him. At this point, we are putting more data in our database and then figuring out which way is more objective to compare with. But once we are done, then we he's gonna be working on his part to eventually make the app available.
Great, thank you. That sounds like a great tool.
Yeah.
Um, we have another question that came back in about the food trucks. Someone was wondering if measurements of contaminants were taken only inside the food truck or if any measurements were taken outside or in an area around customer ordering.
Well, we did only inside because most of them, the workers were staying inside, and yeah, but sometimes it's some guys are taking order outside, but since it was area sampling, so we didn't do like the sampling outside. If we do the actually personal sampling later, then we can actually see the better exposure status. And then for thing is, one of the guys actually had a wood fire outside, so it was not close, but those things are going on, so we didn't want to do it outside.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all of the information today. Oh, someone has a comment to just note that PPE eye fitting seems very timely with COVID. They've
Yeah.
noticed in the paddock of motorcycle racing teams at MotoGP of protective eyewear
Uh-huh.
that did not wear them pre-COVID.
Yeah. Well, we actually want to move forward with the goggles, because we are only doing spectacles or other types of eyewear, which provides better protection. But it's gonna be not easy to have objective comparison, because it's hard to scan, hard to measure the size correctly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for all of the wonderful information today and for sharing your time and knowledge with us. Also, thank you to everyone who joined us for today's webinar. The Education Research Center Industrial Hygiene webinar series takes place the second Tuesday of each month. And this series is offered in addition to our ERC Ergonomics webinar series, which takes place the third Wednesday of each month. The next industrial hygiene themed webinar is going to be on Tuesday, October 13th, and that will be with Dr. Thomas Bernard on heat stress management in 2020 in partnership with the Sunshine Education and Research Center. You can be sure to check out our website for more information and to register for upcoming events at coeh@berkeley.edu/about-CE. And as a reminder, for those of you who have stayed on for the entire duration of this webinar, you're going to receive an email from us tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific time, and that will include a link to the evaluation and also to the recording. Thank you all so much for being here today and for your wonderful questions and participation. Special thank you to Dr. O for sharing with us.
Thank you very much.